Welcome back. All right, news of the day video for all you fine people for your Thursday, June the 6th. Starting with announcer news, actually. And normally I don't talk about the announcer news a lot, but in this case it seems like kind of a big move. Rick Ball, who has announced games for the Calgary Flames for, I think it's 10 years. He's been on Hockey Night in Canada. He's got a lot of experience in the industry, and he is now moving to the Chicago Blackhawks broadcasts. He will be taking over the play-by-play duties from Chris Vosters. Vosters, at times this season, you could see that he was a little bit over his head when it came to the play-by-play for the Blackhawks. This will put Ball and Panger together as the play-by-play and color announcers, respectively. That should be an excellent broadcast. Vosters will be back. He's young. I know towards the end of the season there when he grew a beard, I thought, I wonder if he's growing the beard because he looks really young without it. But at any rate, all the best to Vosters. I know he'll be back, and yeah, we'll see how things go with Rick Ball in Chicago. Should be fine. San Jose Sharks. They have the #1 draft pick, of course, on June the 28th. They're going to draft Macklin Celebrini, and apparently his performance at the Combine has done nothing to dampen their excitement and their enthusiasm about Celebrini and the potential that he's going to join their organization. And so, yeah, he's done well at the Combine to this point. He interviews well. He's done well in all the testing, too. So nothing has happened here to change his standing. The one thing the Combine can do is it can move guys up or down the draft. Usually the top guys stay the top guys, but it can cause some movement elsewhere. So, yeah, Celebrini's lived up to the hype so far. Not a surprise at all to me, everything I've read about him this season. It just feels like it's gotten better and better in relation to the expectations around him. The NHL doing something kind of nice here, and apparently it's the first of its kind with broadcasting in North America, where the Stanley Cup Final will be broadcast with an ASL version, so with American Sign Language, and that'll be on ESPN Plus in the United States and Sportsnet Plus in Canada. You will have the option of those broadcasts. And considering there's 30 million people in the U.S. with some form of hearing loss to qualify as needing this kind of a service, that's great. And it's definitely a market that it makes a lot of sense to cater to if you're the National Hockey League, and they're hoping to expand this program next season. So we may see this for, I'd say, probably a game or two a week. I don't think it's going to be a system they can set up for everybody. But for nationwide broadcasts on ESPN or on Sportsnet, I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that for the occasional one here and there. All the best to the NHL on that production. And yeah, so good choice and smart move. The WWE, and I've always seen the belts that they make as kind of their way of shoehorning themselves into the conversations around those leagues, but it works. And so we've seen belts being made for football teams. We've seen belts being made for, I think, baseball teams have them as well. But now they're going to produce Stanley Cup title belts. So the main belt part is going to have the Stanley Cup trophy and everything around it. And then on the sides of the belt, it'll have the logo of the Stanley Cup winner. And those belts will be available for retail purchase. The plan as well is to make it so that there's team-specific WWE belts. It's one of those things that I have joked around at times about purchasing. I've never bought one because they're really, really expensive, and I understand it. Like the amount of work that goes into them, the cost of producing them is not cheap. But for me personally, when am I going to have a belt? Like, I mean, I could have the occasional video where I'd have like a Canucks belt over my shoulder and you know, do some kind of silly video, but not anything that would justify the cost of these belts. These belts are really, really expensive. And so, yeah. Our expectation is that I will not be purchasing one. I've talked to my wife about this before, and she's like, "No." We've been talking about, like, can I justify this and talk my way through it? And her answer's always been, yeah, no, that doesn't really make sense for us here. So, yeah, the WWE belts, let me know your thoughts. Would you be interested in buying one with your favorite team's logo on it or their catchphrase or however you want it to look? Or is it just way too much money and you wouldn't do that? Again, I'm not buying one. Pierre LeBrun reporting that Jacob Markstrom talks are back, and we expected this, and talks to the Devils are back, because the report was that when there was the almost trade to New Jersey, that he was okay. He would waive the no movement clause to go to New Jersey. That gives him full control over going wherever he wants to go. Other teams have jumped in. Apparently, there are more teams inquiring about Markstrom now than when we were talking about Markstrom right before the trade deadline, which makes sense. The salary cap's going up. It's easier to take on that contract starting July the 1st. Markstrom is, in his mid-30s, but when you look at the numbers from this season, he was very good. Analytics tell you he was one of the better goaltenders in the National Hockey League, and the Devils desperately need a goaltender. They're not alone. There are other teams that are going to be looking for goaltenders. They're going to come calling. But yeah, at this point, I mean, hey, why not send Markstrom to Columbus, and then on July the 1st, Elias Lindholm signs in Columbus, and he can reconstruct the Flames in Columbus. But at any rate, we'll see where Markstrom ends up going. And again, the no movement clause gives him control, so he doesn't have to worry about getting a phone call. And yeah, by the way, we moved you here, and going to a team he doesn't want to go to. Akil Thomas had a good run at the end of the season for the LA Kings, and so they've rewarded him. It's a 2-year extension, $775,000 cap hit. And yeah, Thomas, I think, had a good run at the end of the season. This could be an absolute bargain. We'll see come training camp whether or not he earns a spot on the roster's opening night. The opening night roster sounds way better, so we'll just say opening night roster. We'll forget about what I said there before that. But yeah, Thomas, good player, good instincts offensively, and looks like even though it's taken a while, I believe he's 24 years of age currently, sometimes it takes guys a little bit longer to reach the NHL. Sometimes injuries cause them to take a little bit of time, and right now it looks like Thomas might be ready to become an NHL regular. So if you're a Kings fan, do you want to see him in the lineup regularly or no? Canuck news, we'll start with the first of the Canuck news. It's kind of Canuck news all the way through from here. There's conflicting reports on whether or not Zadorov's contract talks are going anywhere. Ian McIntyre says yep. Rick Dhaliwal says nope. So, or at the very least, Dhaliwal saying that it looks like they're kind of bleak. Zadorov, of course, is one that Canuck fans would really like to see come back. Elias Lindholm, there's talks that are ongoing. There's no guarantee the Canucks are going to be able to hold on to almost any of these pending UFAs, which I'm okay with. Honestly, like Zadorov had a really good run, but if he wants like a really high cap hit contract over a long term, you're better off as the Canucks to let him go. And this is what I talked about in the video about GMs being smart come July the 1st. Don't be blinded by what a player's done to the point where you're hurting your team going forward with that player's contract. So that's the balance that every GM needs to find. Ian Cole appears to be headed to market. I haven't seen anything saying no to that. And it would make sense. Cole had his setbacks in the playoffs. I know there are some Canuck fans who may very well be okay with Ian Cole applying his trade elsewhere. It just feels like every year Ian Cole seems to change teams. But he's a third-pairing defenseman at this point in his career. He can play a regular shift. So, yeah, Cole very likely to head to the market, and we'll see what he gets there. Luke Gazdic. So I haven't weighed in on this, and I'm just going to weigh in on this as best that I can. So just speaking as somebody who, with a YouTube channel, it's known who I root for, and so I'm going to get some negative comments from people who know who I root for. Sometimes it's from that fan base. Sometimes Canuck fans can be, rough, and I know this. And Luke Gazdic, getting some messages apparently on Instagram as well as the formerly known as Twitter, X, and not very happy with the comments he's got from Canuck fans, and basically saying the team's trash, their fans are trash, the Oilers dusted them and all this. And people are mad because they don't want him to be on Hockey Night in Canada when he comes out and says that. But he didn't say these things on Hockey Night in Canada. He said it on a podcast. And I think that like people in media and announcers on TV should be able to talk openly about who they're rooting for or not, other than when they're on TV. And it does get tough. It does absolutely get difficult. I've talked before about how if I could start the channel over again, I might not have revealed which teams I root for. That I might have just kept it completely just as neutral as humanly possible. Yeah, people would have figured it out along the way. But it is a challenge, right? Because you get painted with that brush of, oh, he's a Bruins fan, so he's a Canuck fan? Well, got to use small words, that kind of stuff, right? And so what Gazdic's saying here, I read it as being the words of an Oilers fan. And he is an Oilers fan, and I get that. Just like Kevin Bieksa sits on Hockey Night Canada, he's clearly a Canuck fan. He approaches it different. I haven't heard him trash-talking the Oilers or anything. But I really think it's being blown out of proportion. I think for Luke to wish the Oilers luck in the final, I don't have a problem with him being on Hockey Night in Canada. If he had said these things on a nationwide broadcast, then yeah. I mean, if you're going to go out there and say, Canuck fans are trash, the team's trash, I mean, he's not saying anything that other Oiler fans haven't been saying for the last few weeks. I mean, it did only take them 7 games, right? Out of 7. But I as a Canuck fan, I don't really care. I don't have an opinion one way or the other. It wouldn't mean that if I met Luke Gazdic, you know, let's say down in Anaheim, or if we went to Edmonton for something and I saw him somewhere, doesn't mean I wouldn't talk to him. It doesn't mean I'd be mad at him or like, oh, I'm a Canuck fan, so I can't talk to him. The tribalism in this year's playoffs have been something to behold. And that series between the Canucks and the Oilers was, I think, the ugliest in terms of the fan base interaction. And so, yeah, I get his frustration, and I can only imagine some of the messages he's got. Elliot Friedman coming out as well and defending him and basically saying it's his first time dealing with this kind of vitriol online. Yeah, it can be shocking. It can be really shocking to see that kind of vitriol directed your way. Especially if, in Luke's case, he doesn't feel like he said anything that warrants that kind of reaction. And I don't think he did. I don't. And so I get his reaction. I understand why people are upset. Do I think Sportsnet should take him off Hockey Night in Canada? No. He didn't say it on there, and I don't see anything that he said that hockey fans aren't generally saying. I'm not saying we shouldn't hold them to a higher standard when they're working in media. I've talked as well about how nationwide broadcasts can be frustrating when you've got a color announcer who's clearly rooting for one team over another. But with the regional broadcasts, it doesn't really make a big difference. And again, we know who these guys root for. We do. Sometimes it's more frustrating when you're dealing with some in the media that won't just admit who they're rooting for. Where you're like, I think I know who you're rooting. I have a good idea. They're like, well, I don't want to say. And then it's pretty obvious. So, yeah, Luke's just going through the process. And when I see people saying, oh, he didn't have much of an NHL career, that really doesn't have anything to do with being an announcer. There are some great players who've played in the NHL who are not good at the announcing side of things. And there have been some players who had very short times with the National Hockey League that are very good announcers. One example I would point out, Darryl Ray. Darryl Ray was not like a top-notch NHL goaltender or anything, but he's a fantastic announcer. So there's no correlation between NHL career and ability to announce or analyze the game on the ice. So at any rate, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always, no matter which team you root for. And the teams I root for, I'm pretty transparent about at this point. Although in the playoffs, people often get it wrong. When they're like, oh, clearly he was cheering for this team in this series. I'm like, nah, no, I'm not. I'm not. There's even been times where I'll put out like a member/Patreon video where I say, all right, start of the playoffs, and here's who I'm rooting for in each series. And then if you look at the comment section under the publicly available videos, people often can get that wrong. I think sometimes I'm trying so hard to show that I'm middle of the road that I can sort of say things against the team I'm rooting for in a given series, and it can come across that way. But I do think people try to find whatever they can. In this case, Luke just came out and said it, and I yeah. Again, it's just he's a hockey fan. Don't we want hockey fans to be calling the action? So we'll see if he addresses this on Hockey Night in Canada during the Game 1 broadcast. He may address it. Maybe he doesn't. He doesn't have to. So we'll see what happens. But or maybe Kevin BX will ask him about it. We'll see what happens there. So let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. And again, if you haven't hit like and subscribe, please do. I will talk to you again soon.